What happens when you reach the top only to realize you've been climbing the wrong ladder? Jerry Ewalt built a successful corporate career, but a life-changing encounter with God made him rethink everything. Instead of chasing titles and paychecks, he chose faith, truth, and purpose. In today's episode, Jerry opens up about his blue-collar roots in Chicago, the struggles that shaped his work ethic, and the awakening that led him from the corporate world to ministry. We'll talk about personal freedom, critical thinking, and why questioning everything is the key to real truth and real freedom. Plus, how his work with higher focus coaching is helping business leaders bring faith into their daily lives. If you're searching for something more in life, this episode might be just that wake-up call that you need. Jerry, welcome to the show. Jerry is a Southsider from Chicago, so we're happy that he's still with us today after the all of the
after the disaster season that the White Sox had. I mean, the worst. That was the worst record.
We don't talk about that right
Well,
now.
I know,
Right.
it's just horrible. But
Sore subject.
we're sorry.
Yes. So
It is
actually
hard to be a Southsider. That's right, these days. Yes.
it's probably been hard since Pierzynski used to fight people behind the plate back there.
That was the day. Ozzie was the manager.
Good day.
Yeah, the world champions. Yeah.
So Jerry, we want to get into it right away. Before we, really dive into everything with you, can you talk a little bit about your upbringing in the South Side of Chicago with your working class father as a cop and your mother as a hairstylist as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a while since I lived on the south side of Chicago, but that's where I grew up. We called it Copland in the area that we lived. It was pretty close to Midway Airport, if you know the area. And we had a lot of cops in the area, a lot of cops and firefighters. In fact, the school that I went to, elementary school, and good Catholic elementary schools all over the place in that area. And most of the parents were either cops or firefighters or teachers. So very, very blue collar. Yeah, I mean, people always ask, how was it growing up on the south side of Chicago? And, as a kid growing up there, you don't know anything different, right? That's your life. It's people would say, hey, did you go to the museums and visit Chicago all the time downtown? And I would always respond. I said, no, I lived in my neighborhood, right? The neighborhood is where you grew up. And you rode your bike around, you played baseball, you ran around with your friends. And so, I would say I had a pretty normal childhood growing up on the south side of Chicago with my father as a cop and my mom as a hairstylist.
I think a lot of your upbringing too, Jerry. So probably it actually sounds a lot like you mentioned the American dream. So it sounds a lot like it, especially growing up in the blue collar Midwest. I'm from the Midwest as well. What does that actually mean to you? What did that mean to a younger Jerry Ewalt? What was the American dream to you?
Yeah. So growing up on the south side of Chicago, you start to get a feel for there's more into the world than just your neighborhood in the south side of Chicago. And it's funny when I met my wife in college, we used to always talk about where I grew up and where she grew up. She grew up in a poor town outside of Rockford, Illinois. So a little different experience, but very poor. And I always tell her it was great growing up on the south side. And she's like, but Jerry, didn't your grandfather get killed by gangs? How many times were you actually jumped on the way to school? And, I had to laugh because I'm like, well, that's just how it was there. Right. So you kind of grow up in that type of society, in that culture, and you just get used to it. It wasn't all bad is what I'm saying is you get used to it. However, you always, I think there was a lot of people out there, especially myself, that really believed in the American dream. And I'll reveal a little bit about my age when I said I was born in 1976, actually in July of 1976. So I was a bicentennial baby, right? So I was born with the 200-year anniversary. So I've kind of always been draped in, red, white, and blue, even in the delivery room, right, if you will. So very, very patriotic. I grew up in that, a good conservative Christian patriotic home. and just believe that no matter if you work hard, you will get far in life. And that was kind of the mentality that I took with me, working very hard through school and working and things like that to kind of move up and kind of grab hold of that American dream.
It seems like, Jerry, that, and, growing up in the same small town, Indiana, for me, where the neighborhood, the community was so small, everybody knew everybody. I grew up in a day when, nobody locked the door to their house, party lines on the phone. There's six homes to a party line, forget about trying to get on the internet. There's no such thing. But everybody knew everyone. Everybody kind of had everybody's back. You came from a little rougher neighborhood because there was a lot more people, and there's more culture, different ethnic groups, and you had to be hard nosed. You had to be able to hold your ground on the streets. I mean, am I right? I mean, it was no place for weakness. You had to be strong if you were going to be successful in life.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Pastor Paul. And we talk a lot about, like, how did we get here today as a country, as a world? And you think just about the U.S., for example. I think we've had it good for a very long time, and a lot of people have done well. And you start getting soft, right? So I think if you grow up in that type of environment, like I did, again, I'm not complaining about it. I enjoyed my childhood, but yes, I was where you grew up, where my wife grew up. You left the doors unlocked.
Yeah,
I grew up. We were checking the doors constantly, locking things, putting things away. That was just what you had to do. So I still do that today, and my family laughs at me for doing it a little too much, but it's ingrained in me, right?
Right.
So I think you grow up in a little bit of a harder environment, and it teaches you to persevere, and to, when you get knocked down, you get up. Because if you don't get up, you're in trouble, right? So I know, looking back on that experience, that this was God's way of preparing me for things to come. Whether, in our country or in the culture, whatever might be coming, and what we're experiencing right now.
And Jerry, also, so I think, your parents' influence on you, and also your upbringing, eventually, when you graduated from high school, where did you end up going to college? Because we want to get into a little bit of your, earlier life and the start of your career as well, because you're a very successful businessman. Can you talk a little bit about your education and then the early portions of your business career?
Yeah. So again, kind of growing up in the South Side, and my parents being blue collar workers, I knew I wanted to go to college, and they encouraged me to do that. They had not done that themselves, right? So I would have been the first in the family to go and do that. And I remember in high school, they had us apply to colleges, and so I applied to a bunch of different colleges, and I was playing football at the time, and I wanted to keep playing football. And I remember I wasn't going to apply to the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, but I did, because they encouraged us in high school. And on every application, I would put, like, I wanted to be pre-med, I wanted to be a doctor, and things like that. Again, this serving kind of attitude that comes from, I think, the South Side of Chicago, and neighborhoods like this, blue collar police officers, people like serving. And so I'm like, hey, I want to be a doctor. So I remember applying to University of Illinois as an engineer, and it was the only school that I applied to be an engineer. And I thought they drove trains at the time, because again, I didn't know much. I lived by the train tracks, but no, I learned quickly it wasn't. It was more about science and math, STEM, right, if you will. So I did apply to STEM. I got in, and I realized the prestige of being able to get into that kind of university, to do engineering and things like that. So that is where I, in fact, went. And again, I think it goes back to some of that mentality of, like, yes, it's going to be hard, but work hard through that, right? And that's a lot of things that I try to instill in my kids today, because they have so much more than I ever did. And you could take that for granted. And sometimes you just need to work hard and power through things and get through it. And I will tell you, going through engineering school, it was very, very difficult at the university for me. I just wasn't wired that way, but I was persevering through that. So yeah, that's where I went to school, and met my wife there as well.
So and then after you got out of college, Jerry, I mean, you became very successful in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, what industry did you get in, and how did your path go?
Yeah. So, yes. So when I went to the University of Illinois and studied engineering, I kept the whole pre-med medical mindset. So I wound up going down what now is called the med tech market. So it's medical technology, and that spans a whole bunch of things. But think of like MRI, CTs, pacemakers, cardiac defibrillators, things like that. There's a lot of different technology, especially today, as technology is just exploding off the charts to help people, right? To kind of fix a lot of the various diseases out there, from a technology perspective, not necessarily from biologics, but more from a technology perspective. So I wound up getting a job right out of college, and the job market was great at the time, working for some of these big Fortune 500 med tech companies. And, that whole journey was, so some people went out and be entrepreneurs. Some people went to be the police officers and firefighters of the world. I wound up going into corporate and learning a lot very fast and taking that work ethic with me to climb the ladder pretty quickly.
Yeah. So was you involved in any engineering of any technology as far as devices or products that was you any R&D? Did they let you do any of that?
Yeah. So starting off for sure, so that was my background in engineering. So I did start off as in working in MRI, right? So the imaging technology to be able to look inside your body, right? Quite amazing to know that we can look inside the body and figure out what's going on. And again, this was a good 25 years ago, so the technology has improved drastically. But yeah, starting off in R&D in that perspective, and then advancing specializing more into cardiology and cardiac procedures. So a lot of different devices on cardiology, on whether your heart's beating too fast or too slow. Is it a plumbing issue or is it an electrical issue? So yeah, I was involved in a lot of the R&D aspects for all of that stuff. But more importantly, I started specializing more in bringing those technologies to market, right? So that was kind of the area that I started gravitating towards, of how to commercialize this technology and bring it so that physicians can use it and apply it to people.
And then also, but somewhere along the way, Jerry, I'm trying to remember, I think you had told me before, how long were you in this line of business?
Yeah. So, and I'm still doing a lot of it too today. So I kind of, I'm in and out a little bit, but if you kind of add all that up, it's about 25 years that I've been in that type of business itself. Different functions within that business, right? Because if you think about any business, there's the R&D, there's operations, manufacturing, but there's also sales, marketing, leadership, general management, things like that.
And then, so you had mentioned somewhere along the way, and I would like to have your testimony and your story about it. You had a revelation and a personal encounter with God. As Pastor was actually mentioning before we went on, that you ended up going to Moody Institute in Chicago, which is a very, very prestigious theology school.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping you could explain to us what was that revelation exactly, and kind of what you were going through at the time.
Yeah. And so and these are great lead up questions, is because as we've talked about kind of my upbringing, the perseverance that I've gone through, but in that work ethic, that American dream of like, work hard and things are going to really work out for you. And that's what I was doing. And it was working, right? I was advancing my career. We were getting more money. God was blessing me in the meantime. My family was growing. We had everything that we needed: great house, cars, you name it. It was all happening and taking place. But, right, there was something missing throughout this whole thing, right? Because you're focused, your mind is focused on these material things. And some of them are very good things. They're blessings from God. And I'm not disagreeing with that. But you start focusing on that and you miss what's important in life. We know from Psalm 92, right? Moses tells us to give us a heart of wisdom so that we can number our days, right? So when you number your days and you realize that you're here for a finite period of time, there's something more than climbing the corporate ladder and having a nice car, right?
Right.
And so, I went through an experience for a while where I was pretty miserable. making bad choices, like we all do and have, and just pretty miserable. And I just couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out what it was that was missing in my life when I thought I was living the American dream, when I had all of that going for me. And so that's when God revealed himself to me in a mighty way. The biggest thing that happened was me praying. One, that I didn't know what was going on, why I was so miserable. And I wasn't praying a lot these days, right? This was just kind of going on with my life. I figured God needed to focus on other people that needed more help than I did, and kind of just praying like, I don't know why I'm so miserable. But the second thing that really actually kind of, I don't know if freaks you out is the right way to say it, but I asked God to open my eyes because I couldn't see. I was blind, and I didn't even know why I was praying that type of prayer. But then God did open my eyes in a very mighty way, and I saw the world for what it is. I saw the American dream for what it is, maybe what it can be, or what that vision of what most people think it is. And it changed my life dramatically. We talk about a 180, right? So I had a 180 type of life-changing event because of this, giving my life over to God, but then also seeing all the things that were happening in the world and saying, somebody has to do something about this. So, I'll stop there. But that was the event. I hit rock bottom emotionally, spiritually, mentally, maybe not physically and financially. I still have my family, thank God, around me and things like that, but it wasn't good emotionally, physically, and that's when God got a hold of my life.
So you begin to. So I take it you become more politically aware, and maybe you pursued to find out. I mean, you're like you said, you're very successful in the business. You were very successful in working hard to achieve. But emotionally and spiritually, you were hitting rock bottom, and you were seeing the evolution of America. I take it because I know how that feels going through life and watching America go through phases. So, did you get politically motivated then at that point, also as well as spiritually motivated?
Yeah, so the praying of God, open my eyes so that I can see. The other way to say it is I had those rose-colored glasses on, and I wasn't paying attention. Why would I pay attention when things were going so well for me? So yes, when those rose-colored glasses came off, my eyes were opened. I saw the world for what it is, and I saw our country for what it is. Now, again, I still believe in America. I love America. I know it was founded on Judeo-Christian values. Like and I actually had to go back, right? So like when you give your life over to God, you got to go back and you got to read the Bible. You got to really study it and say, how, like a child, right? What was I missing? How do I understand God, right? And how do I get closer to him? I kind of had to do the same thing with the Constitution, right? And in our country, like, all right, if God has the Bible for us, then we have the Constitution for us. And what does it mean? And you start studying that and you start realizing we are deviating far off the path of the original of what the founders of our country wanted. And so when you start realizing that, you got to ask the question, okay, it's not God inspired, it's not the Bible, but was that good at the beginning? Was the Constitution the right framework for how we should be running our country? And you go through that whole, discussion, debate, and kind of journey. And I've come to the conclusion that it is actually what we should be following. And there's good reasons for it. And it is based off Judeo-Christian values. So fast forward to kind of that event, that timing, I started seeing that and I saw how far we were deviating from the Constitution, right? This isn't about conservatives and liberals or Republicans and Democrats. This is just about following the Constitution so that we can live in freedom in the country that God blessed us. And we're not doing that, and we weren't. And maybe we're getting back on track, but that was the problem. And that did lead me to start exploring more down the political path, not because I love politics. I don't know. I mean, if you love politics, I think there's something wrong. But
right,
there is a necessity to do it, right? You realize how it's impacting people's lives today, and somebody has to stand up. And if it's some guy from the Southsider of Chicago that got jumped frequently, just kept getting up, even though he got getting beat up, then so be it, right? So anyway, yeah, I did start looking more into political path, if you will.
So Jerry, I'm trying to tie this all together though. So
Yeah.
so you had your revelation, correct? And then at some point you left your jobs that you were working for a medical device, and then eventually, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out the timeline. Did
Yeah.
you go to school, to the Moody Institute, or did you jump straight
Yeah.
into political? I think you worked for a political organization as well, and I don't know
Yeah.
if those kind of tie and cross path.
Yeah. So great question. So my background, right, in engineering, I like to try to take a logical approach, and I want to also realize that I don't know everything. As much as I think I know a lot of things, I don't know anything, right? So I always try to bring it back to the basics. So when I gave my life over to God, this is just the type of person I am. I did seminary. I said, I need to learn more. And I was like, what are some of the better seminaries out there that really preach the word of God in the Bible? I don't want to hear from some guy who says he's got some visions and revelation from God, and this is what God's saying. Like, what does the Bible say? So that's where Moody Bible Institute came into play. And I did not quit my job. I did this part-time. So it took me about 7 years. It's a master's of divinity is what they call it. It took about 7 years to do this. It was part-time, had to learn the ancient languages, Hebrew, Greek, things like that. And but I enjoyed going slow. Like I didn't want to rush through it. I didn't know what I was going to do with the degree. I just knew that I wanted to know God in a deeper and more intimate way. You don't have to do that in seminary. It's just my personality, and I wanted to get to the source of it. So that's what I did. I did it while I was still working in corporate America. Then what happened, right? So this is all, and I'll try to tie this all together because I think it's important for the audience to kind of think of their own lives and what they're doing and how they're reflecting and how they're making the most of it. So so this is God calling me to do this, and this took about 7 years. At the end of it, when I graduated, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I met Pastor Paul, and we got involved in his ministry, and it was awesome. It was a great blessing. But I was still, what else is going on? Well, COVID hit, right? So COVID hit. And again, my eyes were open quite a while back, but I saw the country going in a darker, deeper darkness year after year after year. And then COVID hit and all chaos broke out. And I get it. It was a scary time for a lot of people. We don't even want to think about it anymore because it was so disruptive and scary. A lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people were injured. People are still feeling the repercussions of what happened there. But what was really bad, and I know that's all starting to come out now, is the way that we handled the response. And again, this is where it goes back to politics, right? Because this all boils back to politics. We like to say it's science, but now that we're seeing the response that we had, it had nothing to do with science. Science was the excuse that we used to be able to control people and have people do the things that the government wanted them to do for whatever reason. You can speculate all you want, but it wasn't science. And so this is where the politics come into place. And then we also saw the politics enter the corporations in America. And politics got really bad to the point where they're like, these are corporations, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your voice as long as it's the voice that we want you to say, right? So long story short, this is where I started realizing the push, what they were trying to do with COVID, but also the way that corporate America was starting to play out with a lot of the DEI initiatives. So you have the combination of the medical tyranny and DEI and things like that, and squeezing and pushing and forcing people to do things that they didn't want to do that were unconstitutional and un-American. So that's where the politics piece comes into play.
Wow, what a statement. Medical tyranny matches DEI. And you're exactly right. I mean, it's a social justice, what's called social justice and equality and inclusion, wrapped up in a nice little medical tyranny bow, because it was simultaneously. And Dr. Fauci was the poster child saying, follow the science, although every day his recommendation to the nation of what to do changed almost on an hourly basis. You wear a mask, you wear 2 masks, you don't need a mask, you have to be inoculated. No, you need 2 shots, maybe 3, pick one you want. No. And the tyranny part that really bothered me was when they started firing nurses and doctors and firemen and police officers and first responders. First of all, for a whole year, they threw these people into the fray, no one knowing what we were dealing with. Nurses are dying, doctors are getting sick, people are, and then after about 1 year, they say, okay, now we have a vaccine that we think is going to work. Mandatory on the very people who've already been fighting in the fire. I mean, in the military too, did it? Okay, I mean, this thing was a tyranny thing. So, I think in the aftermath of all that, now we're getting the medical. Now we're getting the information that says, "Whoa, blood clots, people falling, young people die of heart attacks, turbo cancers." I mean, everything's off the charts. And what's the common denominator? The common denominator was the vaccine, not as much. It was like as if the vaccine has a longer lasting problem than the virus itself. I'm sure it's a combination, but
yeah.
So you can feel. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm letting a little bit of this frustration out right now because I've had to deal with deal with it. But Jerry, I think you made the term medical tyranny, and it was really used by our government and the governments of the world, because I don't even want to talk about what China did to people, welding their doors shut. I mean, the whole world, were we living in fear or were we living in tyranny?
And Pastor Paul, you nailed it. Like, we're not China,
no,
the United States, right? So we're trampling all over the Constitution with this stuff, right? If you want the shot, go get the shot, but don't make me get it, right?
Right.
That's what they were doing, right? They were making people get the shot. Are there people experiencing racism in our country and being, held back and things like that? Yes, that is absolutely true. We need to fix that. We need to work on that. But you don't work on that, you don't fix that by pushing other groups and other races down, because it's just your turn to be oppressed and things.
No, that don't work.
It's not Christian either, right? That's not American. That's not freedom. So you have these combination of things happening, and then look, we can go into what they're teaching our kids at school, right? So all hell literally broke loose in our country. And now it was leading up to this. It didn't happen overnight, but it almost felt overnight when COVID hit, because everything came out all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you guys are saying here as well. Not only do I think, I think COVID was real. Do I think it was taken advantage of? Absolutely. Just like what the great mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, used to say, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So, yeah, I think they used the COVID situation and the pandemic to see how much control they could actually do over the people. And unfortunately, I think that's just a trial run to see and see what the response was of people. But optimistically looking at it, I think everything's going to come to light, right? You're gonna eventually see all of these things. Maybe not exactly everything that happened, but I think you're going to see a lot of the bad characters from the pandemic and the government control, and people are waking up too. So realistically, I think people started to pay more attention to politics, the CDC, and I think there's a lot of good things that actually came out of it, to be honest with you, because I think people are more awake. They're more, they pay attention more to the legislation that goes on around them. But Jerry, we could go on about COVID forever, but I wanted to ask you, so you have taught a few classes for Paul Begley Prophecy. What actually drew you towards the ministry and Pastor Paul?
Yeah. So, and this is great. It's a great lead into this as well, because again, this is America. You should be free to do what you want to do as long as you're not harming other people, right? So don't force me to do things. Don't force my kids to learn things that they shouldn't be learning. We can go on and on. If you want to teach your kids that, if you want a medical treatment or whatever, you should get it. You should go for it. Maybe it will help you. But you decide. So how it leads then into, how do you apply what I learned in seminary, and how do you go out and apply it into the real world, right? And that's right. Pastors, it's great that pastors audience, they're so in tune, awake, and understand what's going on. I always go back to the foundation. With the world so chaotic as it is, how do you go back and say, what is truth? How do I got one side telling me this, I have the other side telling me this. What is the truth? Is it in the middle? Is it on this side or is it on this side? I don't know. How can you know? So the only source of truth is the Bible. And again, you have to believe in God, and you have to believe that the Bible is the inspired word of God to do that. But once you get over that hurdle and you go, this is the source of truth, and you treat it that way, everything makes sense. Everything we experience with COVID, with the craziness in our world, the wars and the rumors of wars that we're seeing right now. And I know Pastor does a great job of kind of updating everyone on what's going on and how it ties to the prophetic timelines. It's the source is the Bible. And so one of my passions is to go out and help educate people on the source of truth and to encourage them to discover the truth for themselves, right? You can't get someone else into heaven. You can only get yourself into heaven. So you have an obligation before you die to make a decision of who you're going to follow and what is truth. And the only source is the Bible. And once you build that foundation, the rest of the world makes sense, and you can start to understand which direction, which choice, which thing should I do based on truth.
That's powerful. That's very powerful. You have to have a baseline. You have to have a foundation. And when Jesus referred to building your life on a rock or on the sand. The reality is, people who don't take the time to go look for the truth, people who are just too lazy, just say, I'm just going to take whatever comes. No, that's not good enough, because everything's going to come your way, one way or the other. You're going to experience it all. You have to decide if you can handle it. It's sort of like God doesn't really care what we're going through. He cares how we handle it.
Yes.
Because he knows everything's coming our way. Sickness, death, divorce, unemployment, tragedies, bankruptcies, you name it. People have the ups and downs of ebb and flow of life. It's different for different people, different things, but ultimately all these things, in some way, some of these things, I should say, will touch us. So we have to figure out how we're going to handle it, and we have to have a baseline. So I was wondering, because I know you found me, and I'm thinking, why does this guy goes to Moody Institute, this guy's his R&D, he's this engineer genius, he's doing great. What in the world is he doing following this preacher from the cornfields of Indiana? I mean, the last guy on earth, right? Unless I'm bringing a common sense to the whole thing. I don't know. And a little levity to it, okay?
Yes.
I think it's okay. I'm willing to throw it all out there and see what sticks on the wall.
That's right.
As long as I know where I'm standing. When I fall down, I know I hit the foundation, and when I stand up, I'm still standing on it. Is that the draw, the appeal?
Yeah.
Because you got involved with our ministry and even teaching online with prophecy, which was awesome. So is that what? I mean, is that it? Is that why you came? I mean, because we're just normal.
So why do I love
or abnormal? Which is it? Okay.
No, what I love about your ministry, Pastor Paul, which is different from so many. I mean, there's other great ones out there too. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
What I love about yours is that you are not afraid to ask critical questions. We should be asking questions. Like, I remember one of the things, like you'll ask my wife, you'll say, well, what brought you to God, and what was some of the things that got you there? And she'd go down this very technical scientific path of DNA and pyramids. You're like, DNA and pyramid, what does that have to do with God? We're like, well, you realize when you look at DNA, there's no way that could just be random. It's like, if you're building a Lego set, the entire Lego instructions are encapsulated in something smaller than you can see with your own eye for the human body, right? So there's no way that is random. That's number one. And then you look at the pyramids, you go, how are those pyramids built? Something else is happening out there. Like, we can't explain it with all of our technology today. We don't know how to laser precision cut these pyramids and put them in place like they did in the ancient times, right? So what I like about your ministry, Pastor, is that you're not afraid to ask these questions. You take the source of truth, the Bible, your understanding of the Bible is right on. You have that understanding of it. You've been blessed. You've been ordained to do that. And then you ask the questions: what's going on in Israel? How did the pyramids come here? Are there aliens? Like, these things are, you can laugh at some of these things, but what are all these things that people are experiencing? Because when you just take what we talked about, which was COVID and all the things that happened at that time, it wasn't just COVID. It was all the things politically and DEI and what the kids are being taught and all these things all at once. We're being attacked from multiple angles. We've been attacked from multiple angles since the beginning of humanity, right? So
Right.
we should be asking all these questions. And when you understand the Bible, it has a conclusion. There is a conclusion. There is an end. It happens. It's in the book of Revelation, right? And it does appear that we're moving towards that time. Now, we don't know when. We don't know the day, the hour.
Right.
It could be 1,000 years from now. We don't know, but we're moving towards that end. So we need people like you and your ministry to help people think critically of what is happening around me, and should that be happening, and what is God's will for me to stand up against that or encourage this or whatever it might be. And I think your ministry does a fantastic job with it, and I wanted to be a part of it.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I'm just crazy enough to ask questions, and it's okay. All right. I mean, because I'm thinking, Paul, when you and I started this podcast, Drew, we said, if they're thinking about it, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
If they're thinking about it, we're going to talk about it, because that's what we need to talk about. What are people thinking about? They're thinking, what's my future? Where's this country going? What's going on in the Middle East? I seen where Zelensky and Trump are getting ready to sign this deal.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, it's like a light bulb went out. I think a light bulb went off in Zelensky's head. At first, he was resisting. He was upset. He don't like Trump. Trump, you're calling Putin. You're not calling me. But then he realized, so if I let you come in and bring all your equipment and all of your people in your industry and your security to protect it, to dig up the minerals, you're going to give me some of the royalties. You're going to get paid back. And the Russians aren't going to mess with this because you're not going to let them. So, a light bulb went off, and now he's coming to Washington. He's ready to sign the deal. I think that sometimes we have to ask questions. Why are things happening? And then if you ask enough questions, the answer comes. It's when we don't ask the questions is when we stumble around in the dark. If you ask enough questions, the answer comes. And of course, God's word is the ultimate spotlight on it, the foundation and the wisdoms of truth. So words of truth. Anyway,
and Pastor, this is I'm sorry, Drew, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jerry. Go ahead. You're the guest.
I was just going to say, this is cancel culture, right? And this was the other problem with our country right now, is when you stifle free speech. Yeah, we might not like everything someone says with freedom of speech. But when you start canceling people and not letting them have a voice, which again was happening around COVID, of course, then you have these problems. And Pastor, you do this. You allow people to ask and question and debate, and that's how we advance society.
Amen.
And yeah, Jerry, I just wanted to add kind of with what Pastor's saying and you're saying as well. I think it's important, and I mean that's really the big part of putting this podcast together. It's fun, it's something to do, but really, I think it's important for the audience to know, and especially if you have children, it's good to be inquisitive. It's good to not just accept things that you read and not question them, regardless of whatever it is. It's good to be a critical thinker about things. Because if you're not, you're just a robot, right? We're just following along. Get in line. What did they tell you to do? Take a shot. Okay, how many shots? I don't know. It's up in the air. 6 months later, they'll change, how many shots you need. But, it's again, there's a lot of things we learned from COVID, like we discussed earlier, but it's good to be inquisitive and to ask questions. I mean, especially when you're trying to find, not only whatever study or discipline you're doing in school, or if you're just learning something on YouTube or you're watching the news, but also in faith as well, right? It's good to ask these questions in faith. It's not, don't just accept whatever pastor or minister you're following. Find another one, compare just like we do with anything that we're trying to find truth for. Compare different people's opinions, read, ask questions. And Jerry, with that, I also wanted to ask you, so right now you're following, I think what Heidi calls it is your passion project, right? So this is something that you have started. I'd like to talk about it, but before that, you're also passionate about living a spirit-led life. Can you explain what that actually means to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of, for the video game culture out there, right? So there's, usually you level up characters, right? So I kind of view the Christian walk as constantly leveling up, right? So Paul talks about it a lot, right? You drink the spiritual milk, and then eventually got to graduate to actually spiritual meat, and learn the deeper things and understand and get closer to really critically think. So I think what you have is you have the Bible. Like, you got to get good at that. You got to get good at understanding what the Bible says. You have to build your relationship with God. It's a relationship. It's not just some sort of ritual. You want a close walk with God. You want to talk to him and have a good relationship. To have that, so that next level, like as you keep leveling up, you want to live a spirit-led life. And a spirit-led life is a very challenging thing. And I can't say that I'm at the highest level by any means. I don't know if any of us are, but that is letting God take control of your life, right? Because it's one thing to understand who God is and what God expects from you and all these things, but it's another thing to let go of the wheel and let God drive. I know there's all these analogies out there. And when you do that, you're letting God control. You're living a spirit-led life. And that comes with a lot of challenges, right? So again, for me to kind of step out, just even go to seminary and spend the money and take the extra time away from the family, I was compelled. It was something I had to do. When COVID hit, I left very, very good job, right? High paying job, the whole thing, to jump into politics for a while. That was crazy. It was just a crazy experience, but I know that God was guiding me to do that. And it hasn't been easy. There's been a lot of ups and a lot of downs, maybe even more downs than up, right? So valleys and peaks. It's been hard. It's been hard on the family. It's been hard on me. It's been hard on a lot of things. But yet you keep moving forward, right? You get knocked down, you get back up. And maybe, again, that's why God placed me in the South Side of Chicago growing up, to learn that experience. But living that spirit-led life is being in God's will, doing what God's asking you to do, no matter the repercussions. I had a great pastor in California where I was living when I first came to God. He had a thing called it Adapat. It was anytime, any place, anything. You want to live your life as an Adapat life, that I will do anything God asks me to. I will go anywhere, anytime. I will drop what I'm doing. I will move across the country. I will do whatever God's asking me to. And that's really hard to do. And it doesn't, you're like, oh, if God's doing that, he's going to be blessing me and it's going to be awesome. Yes, he will be blessing you, but you could go down for a while. It could be a lot of ups and downs and a lot of hard times, but God is constantly preparing you through those trials. So when you live that spirit-led life, you will go through many trials. It won't be easy, but God will bless you and he'll get you through that. And he's preparing you to do something great. And I think the more Christians that live that life, the better we're going to be, the whole world will be in. And that is a passion for me to try to reinforce that with as many people as I can, that just follow God's will for your life. It may not always be easy, but it will be best in the end.
That's great. That's wonderful. I mean, most people, this is the challenge. It takes a whole lifetime to learn how to live a spirit-filled life. And then you're done.
It does.
About the time you figured it out,
yeah,
it's about over. But
That's right.
it's the journey. You enjoy the journey, learn from the journey, the ups and the downs, and then you can.
What it's about.
And I think the experiences through life, the losses and successes, you can share that information with people as they're going through the journey, and it helps them. Right. Don't get too high, don't get too low, and that's a tendency. I think all of us will do that, and we have to learn how to balance that. I think you do a great job of that. I'm going to ask you, I've always thought about you. I do. I pray, when I meet people, I joke around a lot and I laugh and, are you serious? And I have a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, I do pray and ask God that God would direct someone's life. And I have prayed for you and your wife and your children. I got to baptize all your kids, and
That's right.
got to ordain you in ministry. So I really am invested in spiritually in what God's doing in your life. So I've prayed a lot about Jerry. I said, like, God, what are you going to do with Jerry? This guy's talented. I mean, we need this guy. We don't need him on the sidelines. We need him somewhere involved. Is there a way? And I have always thought, and I don't know if God has ever spoke to you this way, but that you might be someone who needs to run for some type of political office. Because I think you've got the skills. I think you got the charisma. You've got your life, your foundation settled. You got a good wife and children, and you've had the ups, you've had the downs. You've been coming from a working class family, and yet you know what it means to climb the corporate ladder, and then you know what it means to step away and really seek the face of God. I mean, this is a very rare thing. So it's just something I'm going to ask. Have you got any political aspirations, or has God spoke to you in any way about stepping into the political arena?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for saying all those kind words. And you have been a major blessing in my family. Like you said, you baptized my kids and ordained me, and you've allowed me to participate in your great ministry to help out where I can. And so you have been a blessing to our lives as well. So thank you for that. And yes, as a spirit-led, living a spirit-led life, I will do what God asks me to do. And people always ask, well, how do you know what God's asking you to do? Well, I mean, God puts these things on your heart, no doubt, right? So, so ever since, as a kid, that political office of some form has always been on my heart, and that's the great thing with God. Like you got to let it go. Meaning, like, I think that's what God is calling me to do, maybe at some point in my life. But if I'm fixated on it, which most people do with the American dream, right? If I'm fixated on this goal, I'm going to get there. I'm not fixated on that goal. I'm fixated on the goal of following God's will for my life, that spirit-led life. If God leads me to that path, I will gladly step up and do it. But I'm not going to go out of my way to make sure that that happens unless God tells me to do that.
Absolutely.
So to answer your question, Pastor Paul, yeah, absolutely. I'd love to do that one day. I've seen what it takes and all those things, and it's ugly. It's hard to put your family through that. But you know what? I've been knocked down many, many times, and I continue to be knocked down, but I always get back up. So I know there's a purpose for that. So I do believe that may be in my future, but again, that's up to God. That's really up to God and how he's going to show and where that's going to go. But I would definitely step up if God asked me to do that.
All right. That's awesome. I could keep on praying about that then. Go ahead, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so, Jerry, so everything we talked about with your experiences, from growing up, going to the University of Illinois, your business experience as well, and then we've been talking about your philosophy of the spirit-led life. Last time I spoke to you, we were talking about, and I mentioned it already when Heidi was, Heidi's real big on a passion project. Is that still the avenue that you're going now? And can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. So it's the other thing that I think God gave me so having that spirit-led life, sometimes the spirit brings you all over the place. And so
right.
I think sometimes, or it's ADHD. I haven't figured out ADHD or the spirit. I'm still working on that. So I am working on a lot of different things at this time, which is good, right? I'm learning a lot about entrepreneurship and business in general. I'm still keeping involved in the med tech industry, doing things there as well. But one of the things that, the passion project, you call it, is everything. If you were to take this whole kind of, podcast of what we were doing and kind of my background and how I got to where I am, in my skill set, I have a passion right now to help business leaders live that spirit-led life and operate their business as if they were operating it in the kingdom, right? So it's a kingdom-focused approach to how to run your business. And there's some great organizations out there that already do this type of stuff. There's things like C12 and C-Suite for Christ. There's a couple things out there. But sometimes what's needed is that one-on-one to be able to share some of my experiences, not only my experiences in business and how to grow your business and scale your business, but also how you live that spirit-led life and how do you overcome these trials and these obstacles. How do you become an overcomer? I say that a lot. So yes, it's called higherfocuscoaching.com. You can look up some of the stuff that I do. You can work with me one-on-one. And again, I'm working more with business leaders because I think there's a big need for that. Is how do you change the community? You change it, how do you make a change, lasting change in the world? One is God, right? It's the Bible. You got to build that out. You got to have a relationship with God. Once you do that, you want to start working in the community, the local communities where you can really make a lasting impact. And I think the local business community gets overlooked a lot of times. So that's where I've been focusing some of my efforts right now is how do I help those local business communities grow and do a better job growing their business, but with an eye towards what God wants them to do.
Awesome. So you're involved with the higher focus kingdom building business
yes
approach. And yet you're still doing some work, I take it, with the medical technology people. So you're kind of moonlighting as you go, and which is great because that's generally how successful people get where they're going. Is they don't burn bridges, and they keep all options on the table, and then they're led by the Spirit of God, and then God miraculously will sometimes shove you into the direction he wants you to go. In my case, I feel like that's each time it's come down to something, and then all of a sudden God says, "Oh, I see. Okay, I'm trying to lead you this way, but I'm just going to have to shove you down this path." Okay. And then and then you wake up and say, "Oh, okay, I get it. Now I see why you did that. Okay, now I understand." And it's okay. And I think for the listeners out there, you have to reinvent yourself. I'm going to say this. You guys are both young men. And you guys and Jerry, you're already learning it. And Paul, you're probably starting phase 2. I say that a person has to reinvent themselves 3 times in a lifetime. Completely reinvent yourself. And you're growing the whole time. You learn from the past experiences. It could be 3 career paths. It could be 3 different periods of your life, like, raising the children, post-children period, the elderly period. It could be the loss of a loved one and rebuilding your life and situations. It could but generally you'll see people will end up having to reinvent who they are or where they're at in life at least 3 times in a lifetime. And when you're doing that, that transition period can be difficult. But if you have a foundation, as you've been talking about, if you find your way with God first, then you're always able to go back to the foundation and say, "Okay, where do I go from here? What do I need to do now?"
Yes.
And I've had to do this. I mean, geez, how many? It seems like it's been more than 3 for me, but I'm just going to say, and maybe you're experiencing that now, Jerry, Paul, maybe you're experiencing that now, where, you're at another phase in life where he says, "Where do we go from here?" And it's a great thing to ask the question and then listen to the Lord. Listen, he'll tell you, he'll shove you if he has to, but he'll tell you.
Well, Pastor, we should switch spots. Drew and I can interview you because I know you've gone through this, your life as well. But you wouldn't be where you are today without that. And that's what God does, right? He puts you through the fire, through the trials, and he prepares you for these things. So you're right on with that.
All right. Anyway, I didn't mean to start preaching. Go ahead, Paul.
No, that's good. I mean, that's very powerful, and I hope everybody will, take a lot of that. That's really good wisdom, especially for a younger Paul Begley.
Yeah, younger Paul. Well, I'll give you an example. Did you see how Michael Jordan struggled with retirement? Do you see how Tom Brady couldn't retire? How I just saw Gronk wants to come back. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, athletes are terrible with this. they build their whole life, and then it's like, now what? Okay. And man, if you don't have a foundation during the building phase of the growth period, the climbing the ladder period, you got to have a foundation. 'Cause if you don't, that day's coming, you hit the wall and you're like, now what do I do? And you don't have nowhere to turn. You don't even know where to get advice for. You stagger around in the dark. And I think, it's important that people understand that you will face these moments of pivot time when you have to transition. It's coming.
Yeah.
Right. And Pastor, sorry, Jerry. And Pastor, you mentioned climbing the ladder. I wanted to ask Jerry. So Jerry, I'll put all this up when we post the episode. Your website is higherfocuscoaching.com. How can you help? Right now, it seems like a lot of your customers right now are small business owners. Can you explain a little bit about what you are offering at higherfocuscoaching.com?
Yeah, so there's a couple different options, right? So a lot of what I do, I've done a lot of commercialization. So a lot of times businesses struggle. They want more sales. Everyone wants more sales in their business, right? So I help them grow sales. So I could do that in a variety of ways. We have sales training, we have sales like consulting, but we also, one of the bigger ones, I think the best way is the mentoring piece, right? So being able to work with someone through this, because it gives me an opportunity to kind of help them with their business, but to me, more importantly, their spiritual walk with God, right? So it's like combining the MBA and the MDiv together, right? And when you do that, that's when true success happens, right? Now, this isn't prosperity gospel and things like that. Just because you worship God doesn't mean your business is going to be super profitable, but
Right.
you are storing up treasures in heaven, which is much more important than storing your treasures here. Now, you do need some treasures here, and that's what the business is for, so no doubt. But I would say the mentoring piece is the piece that's the most popular and probably has the most impact out there.
I would add to that as well. If you're looking to help grow your business, or you need some help or guidance or experience, obviously Jerry, as we've went through, is more than capable to provide that to you. But also, I think there was something I got in the mail. I forgot what it was from. I bought a coin, right? And they had mentioned in there, they're a Christian company, which I had no idea about before when I bought the silver coin. So really, to be honest with you, when I saw that kind of put a light bulb in my head and kind of triggered this is more than likely an ethical company. So also, I mean, working with Jerry and the Higher Focus Coaching as well, it doesn't mean that your company has to be, straightforward religious, but also just a ethical company for your customers to see that as well. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, that's the big piece of it. And there's so much is being debated right now and what's going on in our country around ethics and, look what Doge is doing and uncovering where's our money going and all this kind of stuff. So again, you don't have to be Christian, but you have to be ethical, right? And we need to get back on track so we can have the dialogues and the debate and things like that. So that's right.
So the way to find you is at higherfocuscoaching.com.
Yes. Yep. That'll get you there.
And that'll get you there. And then you can get in contact with Jerry and you can.
That's right.
And I guarantee you, if you're a small business owner and you're getting started, you own a restaurant, maybe you have a small manufacturing thing, you're just getting started, or maybe you got a product. Maybe you got a product that you're ready, you've got a patent pending on. I mean, Jerry, you've been involved in all of that kind of stuff. You can can help help them build the right path, connect them with the right people, and help them to see the Spirit-filled life. If they want more of God, Jerry, I'll give it to you. Okay,
that's right.
But what I'm hearing you say, you'll give them the tools of success. You'll help teach them the higher focus and be successful.
That's right. And check the links below. We'll put it in there, higherfocuscoaching.com. Also, jerryewalt@gmail.com. And then I'll put your link to your LinkedIn as well, Jerry.
Perfect. Awesome.
But Jerry, I've enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking with you. I always learn more and more, and I'm really I'm right now thinking that the Cubs are done. They got their one World Series for 100 years, so maybe I should shift back to the south side again.
No, spring training.
Okay, it is spring. It's a new year. It's a new season, guys. New year. Maybe this year.
That's right. That's funny.
But
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure being on the show as well, Pastor and Drew. I love what you're doing. Anything I do, support you guys. You guys get the word out there, and you keep us debating is what we need. So thank you.
Yep. Hope to see you soon. Come by and see us down here and under the big tent. We won't be under the big tent for long.
I know.
Yeah. So
yeah. We'll do. All right. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
God bless.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on the Paul Begley Podcast. New episodes will be released every Tuesday on all major podcast streaming platforms. For a video recording of this episode, you can watch and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Paul Begley Podcast. Hey guys, we want you to connect with us. Follow us on X and Twitter at Paul Begley Pod. We'd love to hear your questions you want us to answer on the show. For additional Paul Begley content, go to our website at paulbegleyprophecy.org. If you've thought about it, we'll talk about it. Paul Begley Podcast.